for joining us today, and welcome to Central City and Black Hawk, Colorado. Currently, we're making our way to the Central City Cemetery, which is one of the oldest, largest, and largely forgotten cemeteries here in Colorado. As we do, we're going to pass through Black Hawk, which we see here, which is one of the largest communities in Colorado that permits gambling. Hence why we see these large conglomerate hotels and casinos, resorts, and spas. The neighboring city to Black Hawk is Central City, Colorado. In fact, they're so close that they're often referred to in the same breath. While both towns permit gambling, Central City has preserved its small town quality of life, appearance, and just overall quaintness, as we see here. Both communities are very old and have allowed gambling for some time. However, Central City has that look, feel, and style that you expect from a Western gambling town in Colorado or just the Western United States in general. I'm not much of a fan of gambling myself, but I am a big fan of architecture and history. If you're a fan of any of those three things, though, these cities have it galore. Beautiful architecture, and yes, casinos on nearly every corner. Both old world and old-fashioned style casinos, as well as the big, large, more modern casinos that you might see in other places around the country. Something interesting to note is I'm visiting during the COVID-19 outbreak, and this is actually the 4th of July weekend or Independence Day celebration, and there's nobody on the streets. This is not typical on any given day for these towns, let alone the 4th of July weekend, and it really is an indicator and marker of the times in which we live. With that said, there were no active lockdowns happening while we were visiting, and if there were, I wouldn't have left. And do listen to your local officials in terms of any orders that you may have been given, and please do practice social distancing and stay safe. Now with that out of the way, let's take a look at Central City and Black Hawk a little bit more as we make our way towards the Central City Cemetery. You see, I didn't even intend to visit the Central City Cemetery today. I kind of just stumbled upon it. I was actually here to visit some of the ghost towns that surround these communities. And so, I didn't realize it at the time, but Central City, Colorado is the largest town that's adjacent to the cemetery. However, many of the surrounding communities that once interred its residents in the cemetery are now lost to time or ghost towns. Some such examples of these ghost towns are Nevadaville and Apex, Colorado. Meaning Central City and its cemetery remain, but the size of its cemetery is attributed to many communities that no longer exist today. From Denver, visiting the Central City Cemetery is a relatively easy trip. It's just a 35-mile drive or 3,200-foot climb through the foothills of Denver, and it'll lead you through the Central City Cemetery, which is a grouping of several smaller cemeteries and family plots. The site sits at a total of 8,495 feet, or 258 meters above sea level. So it's breathtaking not only in its landscape, but its altitude. As we make our way through this tunnel, you'll begin to see what I mean. The land is backdropped by just spectacular views of the Rocky Mountains and is peppered with colorful wildflowers. Pretty fitting for a cemetery. It was this structure that first caught our eye and made us realize we were stumbling on something significant. It is. The first gravesite was dug shortly after the gold rush period, in 1884, and the last grave was dug in 1913. It contains 17 families and groups split between 26 unique cemeteries. Today, Central City is home to 765 living residents. However, they are becoming more well known for the thousands of residents who have passed on and refused to leave. The Central City Cemetery is home to countless fraternal orders, secret societies, and religious sects. Some of the most well-known are the Central City Masons Cemetery, the Catholic Cemetery, the Independent Order of Oddfellows Cemetery, and the Knights of Pythias Cemetery, all of which are subplots within the greater Central City Cemetery. A bit confusing, but it goes to illustrate just how massive this place is. You can see how a place of this size and nature has bred a lot of legends, ghost stories, and tall tales, quite frankly. And I'm going to share with you some of the most popular ghost stories today. I'd like to start first in one of the more obscure plots, but very interesting one nonetheless, the Knights of Pythias. While much attention is paid to the Freemason Cemetery, and I will cover this, the Knights of Pythias Cemetery has its own set of legends and ghost stories unique to them. The Knights were the second fraternal organization to receive charter in Congress back in 1864. They were second only to the Freemasons themselves, who received their charter in 1752. This charter was basically passed down from a Grand Lodge in Scotland, or grandfathered in, before the United States was a country. The group's bylaws and charters were inspired by a play written by Irish poet John Benham. The play was a political satire that told the story of Damien and Pythias. The central themes of the play were of friendship and loyalty. New members were provided a sword upon their induction. However, this practice no longer exists. Today, there are about 2,000 lodges, as well as many cemeteries that are scattered throughout the country. Much of this fading brotherhood's dead lie under Central City Cemetery, with their swords by their side. The Knights of Pythias gravesite is characterized by its wrought iron gates that once were topped with faux Tesla balls. Remnants of Tesla balls are still seen on smaller fences within the plots. This is likely a nod to Nikola Tesla, who built an experimental station in a nearby town and conducted much of his research in the city of Colorado Springs. With that said, you can see how the imagination tends to run wild with a deeper connection to Nikola Tesla and the Knights of Pythias. The Knights' gravesite is bordered and sits across from the Independent Order of Oddfellows Cemetery. The border between these sites is the source of a lot of legends and stories, and what appears to be a lot of Wiccan activity. At least that's what this looks like to us. There's some sort of jar here with crystals and what appears to be rose petals or maybe onions or something in there. No clue what it is, but we'd love you guys to help us out in the comment section and maybe clue us into what we're looking at here. But we do believe it to be some sort of Wiccan practice or ceremony that's being carried out there. If we look here a little bit further along the border of these two grave sites, we also see a large circle here that's made with circular sticks and looks to be like little pieces of quartz. So again, really fitting what you see out there and hear out there about this grave site and the border between the Knights and the Oddfellows. On the border of these two sites, you will find unmarked body mounds that curve skywards. There are many accounts of ghostly spirits lurking between these two burial grounds. The most frequent account is of a phantom woman who is not from the period, rather she wears a brightly colored red and teal tracksuit, circa mid-1980s or early 1990s. She sports short curly brown hair, yet has no face. Visitors claim to encounter her as they round corners or tree lines. Often she appears directly to the right of the passerby. Before anyone can say, "Excuse me" or "Hello," she disappears. These interactions have been reported to be both startling to the otherworldly guest as well as the passerby. What we're looking at here is the gravesite of a few veterans of the Civil War here. We're just going to take a moment to get Old Glory out of the dirt and kind of prop it up here as best I can. And you'll see this throughout. There's a lot of decay, a lot of neglect going on here. And, it's tragic in any instance, especially when we see veterans of such paramount wars such as the Civil War. But not only that, there's a lot of families here. A lot of husbands, wives, brothers, sisters. And so with that in mind, let's just take a moment to reflect on some of these folks. Well, leave it to me to come way out here to an abandoned cemetery to end up finding an abandoned mining ruin. While I'm here, I'm just going to take a quick look around. This looks to be a hopper. It's sporting a newly added pentagram. I'm sure that's not original, but it looks to be from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And what I'm climbing up here is a pile of waste mineral or waste ore, slack or slough. And what would happen here is trucks would pull up, or mine carts would pull up directly there and drop in the ore and load it onto either a railroad or a larger truck. Railroad's feasible when we see that there is still a roadway up here. This looks like some sort of foundation. Not too sure what it could have been, but it did have metal rebar and looks like it's being used as a makeshift fire pit now. Over here, we have an opening and vent. Now, this could be many things. This could be just city works, but more than likely, this is a mine opening. So always keep your distance and most certainly never open one of these. Personally, I'm shocked how close all of this is to the cemetery itself, both the waste material and the ruins, because the cemetery was here long before the mine would have been. In fact, they could have been growing in and around the same time. Down here, we found a little bit more ruins. This I'm not too sure what it was. It looks to be something that was just kind of toppled over by a bulldozer and left back here in the ditch. So how it's arranged doesn't give us too many clues. It was either a ladder going up or a gangplank going across, but to what is anybody's guess. Maybe you could help me out in the comments section and help me to, guess what you think this was. Looking at the retention wall here, most of it has given away, letting this waste material just spew over into the cemetery plots. It's a pretty safe assumption to think that some of the headstones and plots themselves have been covered by this spill. If I were to count my paces backwards, it was less than 10 paces, and I have about a 3-foot gait, so that's less than 30 feet from the first headstone that we see to the mine itself. This portion of the cemetery isn't as well maintained, and part of that has to do with that we're in an aspen grove with a lot of overgrowth. If we make our way across over to the Catholic and Freemason section of the cemetery, we'll see it seems a little bit more well maintained, but it's actually just positioned away from most other grave sites in this meadow, although the aspen groves are creeping in and will eventually cover this section of land. The Freemason Plot is the section that is often referred to as one of the most haunted places in Colorado. It has been widely reported that on the 5th of every April and the 1st of November, the grave of John Edward Cameron is visited by a woman. Unlike the Knights of Pythias spirit, this specter wears period clothing. She's said to be a beautiful young woman who wears black Victorian-style dress, a long overcoat, and keeps her hair off her shoulders with a braided chignon hairdo. She reportedly appears twice a year to lay flowers in the vase that sits directly in front of Mr. Cameron's grave. John Cameron died November 1st, 1885, and was a member of the Freemasons. There's a lot of speculations and rumors in regards to the connection between Cameron and the Lady in Black, as she's known. There is a record of a man named John having died November 1st of paralysis of the heart. It is rumored that John was a sought-after bachelor. Despite the local woman's advances, he was not tempted. John's heart longed for and was devoted to a woman who lived nearby, but far enough, on Bald Mountain. The first sightings of the Lady in Black date back to the 1880s. People speculate that the Lady in Black planted the rose bushes that once bloomed each spring beside John's grave. The Phantom Woman continued to appear and deliver her bouquet of roses until June 1888, when the church sexton removed the bushes. This seemed to stop the ghostly encounters, but only 2 years later the sexton saw her again. This time, she carried a bouquet of columbine flowers, which bloomed commonly in the surrounding meadows. He recalled that she placed the flowers in the vase, reflected for a moment, before turning to Bald Mountain and disappearing. At one point in time, there were 12 paranormal investigators who gathered on Cameron's grave and awaited her arrival. They spent most of the afternoon here, and they expected a long night. However, as dusk set in, and to their amazement, the Lady in Black appeared. One of them attempted to touch her, but when they did, she flew off into the woods and suddenly vanished. As a quick aside, this appears to be a coking furnace, but for the life of me, I don't understand what it's doing here in this cemetery. If you have an idea or a hint, please do leave a comment below. And hey, I really appreciate all the time you've spent here with us today. Please take a moment more, if you haven't already, to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for your continued support, and stay safe.